Hello, and welcome back to another edition of the Rebel Talk podcast presented by the Rebel Walk. I'm your host, Zach Moreth, and as always, with your co host, Daylan Flowers. We got a lot to dive into today, starting with that absurd injury report that was released last night. And then we're going to dive into our keys to the game, along with what we believe Ole Miss needs to do if they're going to win this one against Georgia. As always, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel and tune into therebelwalk.com for all your Ole Miss sports needs. And with that being said, let's get into it, Daylan. 7 p.m. hits last night. Every Wednesday, SEC releases their injury report. And Ole Miss throws 26 names on the report, including a doubtful status of Jordan Watkins. And your thoughts on the situation?
Um, Obviously knowing Lane Kiffin like I know Lane Kiffin, I'm trying not to play too much of a what if game with him. And for people that may be tuning in and don't know much about Lane Kiffin, Lane is kind of known for stirring the pot a little bit. And with a game like this weekend, the animosity with it, but especially the pressure on I believe our football team for this game. Um, I think Lane is trying to throw as many curveballs to Kirby Smart as he possibly can. It's weird, you want to take it with a grain of salt, like, okay, should we be concerned? Obviously Jordan Watkins just has the game of his career last weekend in Fayetteville, and now it's not a questionable or a probable, it's a doubtful. So you look at that and you're a little bit concerned. Obviously, Trey Harris still on that doubtful position. So it's weird. I look at it and I see Trey Harris there, and he's been in that doubtful position for the last 2 weeks, and he hasn't played. And I look at that next to Jordan Watkins, that make me think, is he not going to play? Which I hope is not the case because, I'm confident going in without Trey Harris, but I'm definitely not confident going in without Jordan Watkins. I think he definitely was a key piece to this offense last year, and I know it's just been one game that he kind of went crazy, but found his rhythm against Arkansas this past weekend. I know it's going to be a completely different secondary defense against this Georgia team. But, I mean, he looked like the Jordan Watkins that I expected him to look like. Great route running, getting up the field really well, great hands, and just making a lot of athletic plays. But as well, we still see some offensive linemen on that list, like Jaden Williams, who, I really believe his presence is being felt. His missed presence is being felt within this offense. And so I just really can not hope to get him back any sooner. And we still got those guys like Logan Diggs that, we see, probably won't come back at all this year. And so I'm not surprised by those. But obviously Jordan and Trey are the two names on there that kind of just stand out for us. But I think back to it as well, man. 26 is an absurd amount. And thinking about it, it's like, he has to be playing some type of mind game, And I've seen JJ get beat up a lot this season. I've seen Walter Nolan obviously deal with his injury. Jared Ivey took a while to get off the field in favor after, I believe, like a field goal, or if I'm not mistaken, or something that, you wouldn't expect your D-line to come down. And he was dealing with a bunch of injuries throughout the season as well. So I expect a lot of those guys on there because I've seen them throughout the course of this season dealing with different things and getting beat up a lot on the field. But I try not to take too much of it into overthought. I just think it's hopefully Lane just trying to play a few mind games and not actually give the Georgia team the opportunity to say, okay, this is what we need to prepare for. This is what we need to watch film on until the game comes and, Georgia has to adjust to it at that point.
Yeah, and it's hard for me to believe that Trey Harris, a guy who was suited up on the sideline, you saw it last week in the stands, Daylan. He was suited up in pads if they needed him before the game, ready to play at Arkansas. I've heard conflicting reports, actually. I've heard one person say he's not playing. I've heard another person say he is playing. So I don't know. I'm really curious to see what happens. But it's definitely going to be a problem if Jordan Watkins doesn't play because we've seen Watkins rotate into that outside role. So essentially he was filling in for Trey Harris. So if they're both out, those are your two outside wide receivers who aren't playing. And then it mixes up the entire offense and it screws up your entire scheme. And you kind of have to reset there. Caden Prescorn, I believe, will play. So that's a huge addition. I think that 12 personnel is going to be key to getting down the field against a really talented Georgia defense. But I definitely believe that one of the two will play. I don't know what happened with Watkins because there was no sign of any injury. The dude
Mhm.
went off last week. But if Ole Miss wants to win this game, one of them is going to have to play. And on the flip side, I think it's okay if one of them misses. I
Mhm.
know, obviously, as an Ole Miss fan, I would love for both of them to come back in the game. But in my opinion, this is going to be a defensive battle. It's going to come down to what defense is going to make the most amount of stops and who's going to cause the most amount of turnovers. I think Ole Miss has a good chance to do that. But on the flip side, you're dealing with a Georgia defense led by Kirby Smart of basically NFL players at every position. With that being said, Daylan, I want to dive into a little bit of what Georgia brings. A really talented football team who's very disciplined. They're not going to make silly mistakes like we've seen Oklahoma do, or we saw Arkansas do last week. They're going to take care of the football for the most part, if Beck wants to. But on the defensive side, you're not going to see a lot of penalties. And they're going to get after the quarterback. You saw against Texas, they went into Austin and recorded 6 sacks against Quinn Ewers on the Longhorns, who were basically assumed to be the best offense in the country at that point. So when these boys are motivated, there's no stopping what they can do. There's going to be a lot of pressure on this offensive line. That's why we hope Jaden Williams is back in full force and he's able to participate. But on the flip side, I think Ole Miss defensive line is going to make a major impact in this game. But before we get there, I just want to get your take on what Ole Miss has to do offensively and defensively to prevent Georgia from playing like Georgia, Daylan.
Man, it's gonna start with containing Carson Beck. I think I believe Carson Beck is the key piece to this game. The entire game. Georgia's passing the ball for almost 300 yards per game. The Ole Miss defense is giving up almost 300 yards per game through the air. And it's crazy to think about. The defense has been so great, and the sack numbers are significantly up. The rushing yards against the rush is really good this year. This defense has looked really, really good, but this pass defense is, I believe something that people were kind of questionable about going into the season and still have many concerns about it. And I thought that last year as well with Pete, that was like the only thing that I was like, okay, we need to get better there. Our pass defense was not as good as we wanted to be, and we saw it last year in the slaughter that Georgia gave us in Athens. So that's going to be key. How do we keep the ball in front of us, avoid the big plays? Because Georgia's not going to run the football too much. You're going to see Kirby more than likely try to make the run game work this weekend. Last in the conference on first down rushes. So they're going to come out. They're going to try to throw the football, use the short passes, and then try to put a little play action and get our safeties confused and dump the ball over them.
Yeah.
But, man, it's all going to be about Carson Beck. We can see, a Carson Beck that puts up 350 and 3 touchdowns, but we can see what he's done in the last, 5 games. He has like 10 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. So it all bases on how Carson Beck plays. And it bases on how the Georgia team plays too, man. Like you said, they went into Austin, put up 6 sacks against what I think most people kind of consider at that time the best offensive line in the country. And they came out of Austin with a win. Or we can get the Georgia team that struggled against Kentucky, that struggled against Auburn, that, in the first half against the Alabama game got murdered, and, came back and made a game, but still ended up losing. So it depends. But Carson Beck is going to be the key feature for this game. And Georgia fans get a little bit more excitement with Trevor Etienne, being announced. It's as we thought would be available for Georgia. Obviously, we don't know how healthy he is, but he's going to give it his go, and they're going to do what's best for this team to come out with a win. But it's going to start with that pass defense. The linebacking core and the defensive line, they've made their presence felt this year. So now it's really up to them to make plays happen, and not only just keeping the ball in front of them. I want to see a turnover happen. I want an interception.
Yes.
I want this pass defense to get a little momentum going in the crowd. Get a big play to happen, turn the ball over, get Vaught Hemingway rocking, make this happen, because this is a quarterback right now that's turning the ball over quite a lot over the last month. So this could happen, and I'd love for it to happen. So that's where that's going to start, and we're going to have to play a 4-quarter game.
Yeah.
One thing that and you can kind of piggyback on this if you like. I was kind of frustrated with the first 4 non-conference games is we weren't really able to see this team play 4 full quarters. And I truly believe, even going before the Kentucky game, that was going to come back to haunt us, because when it came time to play an actual team like Kentucky, they had already prepared for what we were not prepared for, if that makes sense. And it bit us in the butt. And I think, we've gotten the ability a little bit to learn from that based off the LSU game and based off the Kentucky loss. But I don't know. Even last weekend, we really weren't concerned going into the fourth quarter because we had built such a lead. I haven't really seen this team in a late game situation truly be under stress. I know that Oklahoma game was close, but I wouldn't say we were concerned, especially how we came out after having, and then we kind of decimated them in the third quarter. So it's going to be a 4-quarter game. How do we make the correct decisions the entire game? 4th and 1, how do we make the right decision? How do we get points when they're given to them? How do we clean up our penalties like we did so good against Arkansas? Those are going to be the necessity things for me just in this internal moment. And we can't beat ourselves up. And that goes back to the penalties and not taking dumb sacks as Jackson Dart has done so far this season. And not, one thing I will say, and Jackson Dart's taking care of the ball really well this year. Only 3 interceptions, and I think that's something he's done tremendously since his first year. His first year was a struggle last year, cleaned up his interception rate a lot, and has done the same thing this year. So that's going to be key as well. But man, it's going to be a lot on Ole Miss. They have the keys in their hands to win this game, and it's going to see if they just take the key and put it through the door.
Spot on. The ball is in the hands of Ole Miss. The boys are playing out of their minds right now. They're going to have to carry it into this game. One of the things I want to touch on that Daylan brought up is, what version of the teams are you going to get? You have a Georgia team who looks very suspect at times. If you go back and watch some of those highlights against Florida, I truly believe if DJ Lagway stays in that game and doesn't get injured, it can go anyone's way,
Yep.
which is crazy to even say. It's Georgia, like the standard of college football. Then you look at Ole Miss. I think if you play the way you did against Arkansas, you go into LSU and you beat them with a very similar result. And obviously the Kentucky game speaks for itself. We all know we should have won that game, which is just horrible. But Ole Miss has shown 2 very different teams, essentially. And I think Georgia's done the same. And they did it in one game against Alabama. Honestly, Georgia probably should have won that game, but it was a really sloppy first half. And the reason why Bama was able to pull away with that one is because they capitalized on Carson Beck's mistakes. And this is something that teams like Texas didn't do. This is something that Florida did a couple times last week, but they didn't take advantage of it as Alabama did. So when you look at how you have to beat Georgia, it's going to be capitalizing off the mistakes that they make. It could be Rainey. It could be a fumble from Carson Beck or Etienne. It could be an interception, but you have to go get some points after that when you have the crowd in your favor, because if you don't, essentially you're going to hand the ball right back to Georgia, and then they reset and they have a monster drive. That seems to be the story of their season. If you look at those games when Beck has thrown 2-3 interceptions, they're managing to win by double digits in a majority of them. And that's concerning to me. So it's really going to be on the Ole Miss offense to try and pull away from this Georgia defense when they have the opportunity to do so. And if they don't, it's going to be very difficult to walk away with the win. Question for you, Daylan. Rain, light showers, it looks like, for a majority of the day. What team does this benefit more?
I think it does us. I really think it benefits Ole Miss more. I say that because it's been a gloomy week here in Oxford. We've gotten out there, and I've seen us prepare for that a little bit. But as well, that was a little bit of the weather in Fayetteville this weekend. It was sprinkling and raining, a light rain before the start of the game, and even throughout the midst of the second quarter, it was raining a little bit. And the game never would stop, obviously, it wasn't needed to. But I think that prepared us for this weekend, and I saw us go out there in that type of environment and play a clean game against the Razorbacks. I think we can do the same thing with the home field advantage on our side as well. So I definitely think it benefits us. But as well, I watched the offense maneuver in a way this past weekend that I hadn't seen them do all year, and that's because they played their tempo. They controlled their pace, weren't giving up a lot of penalties, And I think we were truly prepared for whatever type of weather situation was in Fayetteville. And I think that's something that we knew going into this week. Maybe this Saturday it's going to be a little bit gloomy, maybe rainy, blah, blah, blah. They've dealt with that this year. It rained earlier, I believe, on the first game of the season. And, I don't think it did during the game, but it rained throughout that day.
Yeah.
And then they've played in this type of environment before. I think, if anything, from a fan perspective, would be like, as a player, man, this is what you live for. Types of game you can get down and get dirty and have fun with it. But I think it benefits us 100%, man. Like, it can go either way, but I've seen our offense, through all the faults, take care of the ball really well this year.
Yeah.
And the Georgia offense has not done that so far. And I think that's going to continue this weekend. But I think, that can go either way, but I definitely think it benefits us 100%.
That's a great point. I didn't even think about that. You have to consider that Jackson Dart has just been way more cautious with the ball in comparison to Carson Beck. Against Florida, Beck was 1 for 8 and threw 3 interceptions. So it's going to be crucial for your guys of Prince Emmanuel and Walter Nolan, Perkins, the whole defensive front, to be able to attack. And I said this on another podcast, but I truly believe if the defense can get around 3 to 4 sacks, I think Beck is going to make enough mistakes to allow Ole Miss to win. Because, elaborating on what I've said in the past this week, when you look at sacks, sure, on the stat sheet, it's 3 or 4 sacks, whatever the case may be. But the plays where Beck is scrambling out of the pocket and throwing it away, or taking a slide for a couple yards, or throwing down to a receiver, making a bad throw and throwing an interception, those aren't accounted for. So I truly believe 3 or 4 is the number for Ole Miss, because that means they're going to be applying pressure for the entire game. But looking at, again, if it is raining, I think it could go either way, right? I do like the experience that Ole Miss has, but if you look at the rushing attacks of both teams, none of them are really off the charts. Though Etienne's a great player, we have Bentley, who hasn't played a lot, but he's a great player. None of these rushing attacks are standing out at all. It's a lot of yards in the air. And at the same time, both defenses are elite in the rush. So in my opinion, the rushing attack from both sides of the ball kind of goes away, whether it's raining or it's sunshine out there. And the game's going to be telling what goes on in the air. Just looking at the Georgia wide receiving core, really, a really good group of guys. Arian Smith, Dominic Lovett, Dylan Bell are the big 3 for them. But something I've been talking about throughout the week is these are kind of undersized guys. I think the tallest out of the 3 is 6'1". They got one 6 feet and the other 5'10". And I really do think that plays nicely into the Ole Miss secondary, who doesn't possess a lot of size. Isaiah Hamilton, I think he's 6'2". He has great frame. Trey Amos has a great frame. But those safeties over the top, Jaden Kennedy, who plays safety, little nickel at the same time, Trey Washington, Lewis Moore, these are smaller type guys. And we've seen wide receivers like Kyron Lacey, Dane Key of Kentucky. You saw Andrew Armstrong play well last week. Those are really bigger frame dudes who really had their way with the Ole Miss secondary. So I'm expecting good things in a better matchup. My prediction, I truly believe Trey Amos is going to get an interception. I think the defensive line is going to get after Carson Beck. And I think Amos is, just like he did in that SEC championship last game, wearing crimson, I think he's going to be a complete lockdown cornerback, Daylan. And I'm really looking forward to it. Before we end this thing and wrap it up, what do you think is going to happen in the running back room, my guy?
I don't know, man. And this is just me being honest. Like, I feel like this has just gone on way too long. And I think, honestly, we're all tired of it. And we just want to produce. I mean, for the past couple of years, especially since Jackson Dart has been here, this has been a balanced offense. You can't prove me that any other way. We obviously run an RPO type system, but we're effective because we have ran the ball really, really well over the past couple of years. I haven't been able to do that this year for a variety of reasons: the play calling, the offensive line, the injuries on the offensive line, and just the inconsistency of guys, and even the size. I mean, I think Henry Parrish was really, really explosive and elusive, but he lacks size, and that kind of dedicated away from us using him as a receiver, and dedicated moving away from a lot of play calls that I believe in the passing game that we had him out there protecting and being a pass blocker. I was pretty surprised to see how good Dominic Thomas looked against Arkansas.
Oh,
I
I
mean,
agree.
for his size, he looked really, really well and was cutting the holes really good and kept driving his legs really well to make sure he was doing his best to get a first down. I thought he looked pretty decent. So I'm not overly concerned about it right now.
Good.
I just hope that this opportunity is a time we get more of a balance. I keep saying to myself, maybe we're not seeing the full playbook until games like this because we didn't want Georgia to scheme for this. And that's what I'm keep trying to believe, but it's hard to, but that's truly what I'm trying to keep believing. And so maybe it opens up this weekend and maybe, even where times where it's like, okay, the rush isn't working, but we still have to try it. We try that persistence and then it opens up for us just a little bit. And sticking on the offense, as much as Carson Beck has been concerning, they still have put up 30 points in 7 of their 8 games so far. So I think it's going to take a 30-point effort from our offense to win this football game. I think that's going to be huge in putting up points simply and taking the points that are given to us. I thought we did a great job against Arkansas, just better in the red zone. And Daquan Wright looked really good in the red zone too, but we struggled so much this year with getting to that point, like you were talking about, and not taking the opportunities that were given to us. We have to do that this weekend. As simple as that. I watched this too many times, get ample opportunities against LSU and not jump on them as an offense, and make plays happen. I don't expect every throw to be a completion by Jackson Dart. I don't expect every run to go for 50 yards. I don't expect every catch by a receiver to go for a touchdown, but I want to see consistency. And if you see one opening that maybe didn't work, how do we regroup, change a little bit, and then allow something that maybe didn't work a little bit to now work more? And that's going to be on adjustments. Kirby Smart, I believe is the best coach in the country, but what Kirby does really well is adjusting. I remember the Alabama game, how well they adjusted coming out of halftime. I remember the Rose Bowl in 2017, and the momentum they got against Oklahoma in that game, with the field goal late going into halftime, but understanding the offense was killing Georgia and they were rushing the ball and not even really worried about Baker Mayfield's ability, but how good they were running the football throughout that first half. I watched Georgia come out in the second half against that OU team and just shut down the run game, and it's really shut down the offense, and they ended up winning. If things don't go our way in that first half, or even if they do, Kirby's going to understand this is a 4-quarter game, and he's going to have adjustments ready in his back pocket going into halftime. So this is just as much on our coaching staff as it is our players. How do they respond to adversity? Simple as that, man. And one more thing that you kind of talked about. When we put pressure on Carson Beck, and he's not going to do this too much, but we played Taylor Green last week, and I watched Brock Vandagriff do it a little bit. Quarterbacks will have the ability to tuck and run when we don't finish sacks or we get in the backfield and don't get the quarterback wrapped up. We got to have some type of linebacker there. Not always, because I don't think Carson Beck's going to do too much of that. But on those third or fourth down opportunities, when they know, Carson Beck knows, hey, I don't have to make a home run play. I just need to get a first down. Keep a linebacker there, or even disguise him to go act like he's going to play a receiver, then bring him back up. That's going to be key, getting off the field, on defense when we have the opportunities. But man, it's exciting weekend, man. This is what we waited for. This is the game of the season, regardless of how the season's went for us so far. And this is the game where all the media attention is going to be on us. So it's do or die this weekend, man.
Yeah, this is it, man. This is the game that you built really this entire season around. This is the game last year where Lane Kiffin recognized, hey, we got to get faster, we got to get longer, we got to get more size, speed, strength, everything in between. And I think they've done that. Yeah. But they haven't played to their potential. They didn't do it against Kentucky or LSU. And right now it's put them in a situation where, quite honestly, their backs are against the wall and there is no margin for error. This is as must-win as must-wins get. I think Ole Miss has done a nice job the last 2 weeks handling that pressure and performing nicely. For what I believe Ole Miss has to do to win this game, the first key for me is you have to win third downs. Both these offenses are in the middle of the pack on third down. Georgia's offense is a little worse than Ole Miss, but both their defenses are top 10 in the country in terms of stopping third downs. So what offense is able to rise to the occasion and move the ball down the field on those third downs? Another key for me, Daylan, I mentioned earlier, but getting those sacks. I think whatever team is able to get more sacks, and I think the number for both teams should be around 3 to 4. It's going to be simple, right? If Ole Miss applies pressure on Carson Beck, the odds of him throwing 1, 2, or 3 interceptions is high. It's very high, and we've seen it consistently. On the flip side, if Jackson Dart is scrambling for his life, that's when he gets uncomfortable and the offense slowly becomes nothing. Perfect example, this is against LSU. Every time that Jackson Dart was getting pressured, the offense don't move. It's a 3 and out. Then he's not hitting open receivers when he feels calm, because I don't think he ever felt calm in that game. So the defensive line on both sides of the ball has a crucial impact for me. And then I think if Ole Miss wants to win this game, they have to score more than 27 points. And obviously for that, on the flip side, you got to prevent Georgia from getting 28, because they've scored 30, I believe, almost every game this year, right, Dylan?
Except for one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, except for that Kentucky game. So I think keeping them under 28, and then obviously you have to outscore them if you want to win. That's what Ole Miss is going to have to do. In terms of who I think is going to win this game, I was thinking Ole Miss earlier in the week. As the week progresses, as this injury report comes out, I am taking Georgia 29-27. I think Lane Kiffin has a lot to prove. I've been saying it throughout the week, but he has struggled to get over the hump of Alabama early in his career at Ole Miss. And the last year, he really struggled against Georgia, and we got humbled there badly. We were the 9 seed, for those who don't remember that game, and we lost bad. I think it was 52-17. Kiffin hasn't been able to beat Nick Saban. He really struggled against last year against Kirby Smart, but it's a different roster. It's a different feeling at Ole Miss. And this is the game that you've constructed the fans to buy into, that's going to lead you to the promised land and ultimately land you a bid in this 12-team playoff, I believe. So backs against the wall. I am picking Georgia, but as we know, I'm always praying that the Rebs are going to pull out with a win.
Whew. Put me on the spot there, man. I'm going 34-31 Rebs.
There we go.
Look, I think the players have continued to check in, and I thought that was something they weren't going to be able to do after the LSU game. I was really concerned that after the LSU loss that we were going to lose complete hope. And I haven't seen us do that this year. And I'm really proud of the players and the staff coming together still and continuing a fight. And I think they understand the magnitude of this game. I will say I think that being here in Oxford, this being a home game, helps me pick Ole Miss winning. I think that builds on, just kind of what I've seen this year and last year. It's going to be a close one. And, like you said, how do we make the right decisions in the moments where it's tough and not overdo things? I don't want to force touchdowns. I don't want to force conversions on 3rd and 4th down. Make it simple. Don't overdo it. That's going to be the key, and man, it's going to be a fun one. I'm just excited. I'm like eager just for it to be Saturday and for the game to start. So we'll see how it goes, man. I definitely get your point about Lane not unfortunately winning the moments that he needs to win over his 5 years here. And I'm really just trying to hope that changes this weekend. So I'm going 34-31 Ole Miss.
I like it, man. And I want to add that if Lane wins this game, everything changes. None of those games matter anymore, because you have overcome the hump that people have said, including myself, you haven't been able to get over. So I'm hoping that's the case. We have another injury report. We're recording at 4 p.m. right now on Thursday. There's another one dropping tonight, another one dropping on Friday, and obviously the day of the game. Mm-hmm. Don't expect much out of those. Probably a lot of questionables and probables, but definitely keep your eyes peeled on the Jordan Watkins and the Trey Harris situation. As always, continue to tune into the rebelwalk.com for all your Ole Miss sports needs. Is that all you got, Daylan?
All good, man. Hotty toddy, y'all. Be there, be early, and be loud.
Like, subscribe, hotty toddy, and go Rebs. Thanks, guys.